very sad. Yeah.
It's very sad.
Very sad.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. I am Jackson Nikolai.
I am Jacob Mann Christensen. Thanks for joining us for another episode, another conversation about another great script. And we're in this weird world right now where we're like, our episodes are pairing for some reason. I have no idea why that happened. I mean, we arranged the schedule, so it's on us, I guess.
It's on us somehow, but somehow we've got this sort of through line happening in this season. We started off with a couple of episodes about musicals. Last week we talked about Dance Nation, which is not a musical. However, dancing and music features prominently in it. And this week we are talking about Dancing at Lughnasa by Brian Friel.
Yeah, well, they're very different perspectives on dance this time.
Exactly,
I will say. While dance features prominently in both scripts, their sense of what dancing is doesn't have a lot to do with each other, I don't think.
we're definitely evolving the theme. We have left our original spot, but still the through line is evident. Excited to talk about this play by an amazing playwright, a well-lauded playwright, someone who is held near and dear to people's hearts, and Brian Friel, and also just this play, which kind of took its moment by storm, and has since had lots of revivals, very well loved for lots of reasons. So yeah, I'm excited to get to talk about it.
Yes, and great movie adaptation as well, which is always nice to do plays that have movie adaptations, just because the audience gets a little bit wider. But this is, a really great play as a play out of Ireland too, and so we do this at different points in episodes without a ton of consistency. But it's probably worth saying that we're Americans, and so our sense of Irish culture and Irish pronunciation and stuff like that, there's going to be stuff that we miss. Undoubtedly, there's going to be stuff that probably we misinterpret. So as always, we invite the conversation to continue outside of this podcast, outside of this, around about an hour that Jackson and I will talk.
Yeah. No, it's definitely worth saying at the start. We may have inherited, especially in my case, I've inherited quite a bit through my mother and my grandmother from my Irish side, but we are yet ultimately pretty removed from the world that Friel is writing about. So there are definitely some things that we might miss, and that's part of the joy of getting to broaden the conversation out to folks, and out into continuing to talk about this play even after the podcast is finished.
Yeah, and Dancing with Lughnasa is a great play. It's remarkably moving, even for how removed my contemporary life in 2022 America feels from this story about rural Ireland in the 90s, or no, the 30s. I said 90s, but I meant 30s. So we're almost 100 years removed from the setting of the play, and yet there's still so much that just kind of shakes you about the way that the family is portrayed and the way that the story is told. So it's a great play to have a conversation about, even despite the kind of gulf that will exist a little bit in the conversation setting and the play setting.
Yeah. Big sort of themes sort of run through themes of trying to belong or trying to have joy in the face of trials, all these sorts of things. Excited to get into the conversation around it.
Absolutely, yes. Before we get too much farther, I guess I should say, we will invite everybody to consider heading over to patreon.com/noscriptpodcast. That's patreon.com/noscriptpodcast, all one word. That's the easiest way to find us on Patreon. Over there, if you haven't already done so, you can become a supporter of the show. It is just such a wonderful opportunity to be able to do this podcast in the way that we've been able to do it. And the way that we've been able to do it is primarily because of the folks who are supporting us on Patreon. We love to do this show. It's just not free to do. And there's, as anybody else who's run a podcast knows, there are there's money that goes into running a podcast, running a weekly podcast. There's a pretty significant time investment, and we just couldn't do it. It just would be a factual impossibility for us to be able to do No Script in the way it's existed without the folks that are supporting us on Patreon. If you head over there, you take a look at our page there, you can see we've got a couple of different tiers. The tiers correspond to a monthly amount. The lowest amount is $1 a month. I think that's really affordable. I think $12 a year is easily, you're getting that much return on the time that you spend with No Script. And as I have said a lot, I know a lot of folks that would just like, if somebody needed $12 in their life, would just be like, here, have $12. What do you even ask? I mean, fine, here's $12, whatever, you know? So that's, I think, the level that we really encourage people to consider joining us to support at. There's higher levels, of course. If you can afford more, that's spectacular. But that $1 a month level, even that is really, really helpful to us. And there are perks to being a patron. Of course there are. You can check those out on No Script, what goes on over there on patreon.com/No Script Podcast. If you're a supporter, huge thank you to you. Can't say it enough. You make running the show possible for us. So big thank you to you all.
Yes, thank you all very, very much. We love you guys over there, all of y'all over there. And looking forward to seeing you at patreon.com/No Script Podcast.
And now back to the script.
Here we go.
I considered just for a second doing that in an Irish accent, but then I was like, no,
nice.
Not going to do it. I will say, look, I've been in, at last count, 3 plays in which I had to do an Irish accent. And I actually feel okay about my Irish accent, my stage act. I recognize that it's not good, really. I mean, if you're an Irish person, I am in my life right now. I spend quite a bit of time with an Irish person, and I would assume that she would not be super thrilled with my Irish accent. But for what it is, I actually feel okay about it, but I'm not going to do it in our podcast episode here. So that was a teaser for something you're never going to get paid off. Sorry.
You're never going to get admirable control. We're going to jump in just a little bit with some context on Brian Friel and the play Dancing at Lughnasa. So Brian Friel has an illustrative, I don't know, a long career, and it's full of a lot of things. He was born in Ireland, in, I believe, County Tyrone, and grew up there and started writing at a very in 1959, or 58 actually, his first radio play is produced by the BBC. He also had a long career in politics as well. A lot of his early plays were very political, especially around the Troubles and Ireland trying to kind of navigate its nationalism and all that. So he has a lot of kind of career in that as well. Served in the Senate for a while. But he also has 24 plays, a large anthology of plays, and I believe 14 of them are set in this kind of fictional small town that he has created of Ballybeg, which in Irish Gaelic is a small town. So amongst those plays that are set in Ballybeg is the play that we're talking about today, Dancing at Lughnasa. He had a good deal of success in his plays throughout the 1950s and up to the 80s. He briefly served a stint on the Senate of Ireland, and then in 1990, his Dancing of Lughnasa play comes to life, and that kind of brings him back around again. The play had its first productions in 1990 at the Abbey Theatre, and then was transferred to the National Theatre in London in 1991. So it goes from Dublin at the Abbey over to the National Theatre in 1991. It then goes to Broadway at the Plymouth Theatre, and it won a bunch of awards there. It won the Tony Award, it won the Drama Desk Award, it won an Olivier Award over for the BBC for Best Play. It has a number of revivals, 1999 and 2000. There was a Dublin revival, another Dublin revival in 2004, another London revival in 2009, and in addition to that, there was the film in 1998, right before the Dublin revival, which starred Meryl Streep and directed by Pat O'Connor. The play kind of just has this blossoming that happens in the 90s all the way through the 2000s. It's a play with a relatively small cast, not a huge cast of characters, but just intense relationships, and you get to see this play done quite a bit, even up to today, either in regional houses or in college theater. Often, a lot of it winds up being a great role to be practicing a regional dialect, and so it's kind of one of those plays that if you have a group of actors that is kind of their focus, this play comes up pretty quickly on the list of plays that you want to be able to do, both for that, but also for the kind of depth of character that is in here of sort of transforming naturalism into deeply meaningful behavior, is a big part of this play. And in fact, Brian Friel is sometimes termed the Irish Chekhov for that reason. He's playing with realism, he's playing with naturalism, and kind of presenting it, but also transforming it in some ways, which I'm excited to talk about. This play has a lot of naturalism in it, but some very sort of surrealist moments, that I'm excited to get to talk about.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so this is a play. It's a family play, I think you would say. Some people have termed it a memory play, using the Tennessee Williams term for that. Basically, this play is set in 1936 across a couple of weeks in August. That's a little misleading. It's really only 2 days, but the 2 days are separated by a couple of weeks in August. This is August, around the time of the harvest. And the harvest festival, the Lughnasa, is where the title gets it from, is that in the town where the play is occurring, there is this harvest festival, which is a festival to a Celtic god, the god of the harvest. And that will sort of, the ways in which that festival's traditions and ceremonies conflict with the Catholicism of the region that some of the characters hold near and dear to, will become kind of part of the storytelling. The family that we are spending time with is really a group of 5 sisters, the Mundy sisters, and these women are not young anymore, not in the sense of being teenagers or children. They are adult siblings, ranging in age quite a bit, from Chris, the youngest, who is 26, Christina, and then all the way up to Kate, the oldest, who is 40, and then all the way in between. We also have Agnes, Rose, and Maggie sort of filling the gaps in there in terms of their ages. They all have an older brother named Jack, and that makes up the family that we see. There is also a young boy named Michael, who is Chris's son by Jerry or Gary.
Yeah, I think Jerry.
So
for
Jerry,
today at least.
Yeah, there you go. So Jerry and Chris have had a son, Michael. Michael, in the present moment of the play, I guess you'd say, or the past moment of the play, I don't know, it gets a little confusing, is 7 years old. So he's young. So that I've just described as the entire cast of characters for the show. The play is frameworked or scaffolded, I guess, by, and this is what makes it a quote-unquote memory play, whatever that means to you, by Michael narrating the action of the play. And Michael, the narrator, again, whether this is the present moment or the future moment or whatever, Michael, the narrator, is an adult man. And he is looking back at this couple of days across a couple of weeks in August in 1936, the time that he spent across that, the things that happened to the Mundy family in that period of weeks. And unfortunately, what happens to them is some unfortunate stuff. This play is sort of heartbreaking, even amidst all of the beautiful possibility and optimism that the sisters share across what their conversations in the play. The whole play is set in their small house that they all share and their patio, really the kitchen living space that they all share, and the patio, this interior-exterior space that gets played on some. Here's just kind of a general overview of what's going on and what happens to them. Jack, the eldest brother, he's in his mid-50s. He has just returned from serving in Uganda as a missionary to a leper colony. And he has contracted malaria, which at first blush is why he has been sent home to recover. And this is not a spoiler, Michael tells us this very early in the play, to die. That's why you think he's come back. Across the course of the play, what the sisters learn about their older brother, who has kind of become a town celebrity for his work in leper colonies in Uganda, for his life's dedication to doing this, what they learn is that really he's been sent back because he's sort of lost his faith in the Catholic Church and in the strict religious traditions of the Catholic Church at the time, and in fact has begun to believe deep in his soul in a lot of the religious and spiritual traditions of the people that he's been living with, their gods, their religious ceremonies, their religious practices. And so the Catholic Church, when they learn this about him, sends him back home out of the leper colony that he spent his life worked in. Because of the malaria, because he's aging, because of the sharp culture change, he is dealing with a lot of struggles in readjusting back into his life in Ireland, back into his family. Kate is the oldest of the sisters. She's the one that really makes all the money for the family. She's a school teacher. Nobody else really has a job that pays that well, but her job at least pays enough for them to live some sort of modest life together. However, because of Jack's return, there's a threat to her job because, of course, the school that she's teaching at is run by the local Catholic Church, and they're learning these things about Jack. So her job is up for threat. Agnes and Rose, they're kind of a pair of sisters. Rose has a disability, a mental disability of some sort. Of course, at the time of writing the play, they just called it simple, but there's some sort of mental disability there. And Agnes is kind of her fierce protector and partner. They sew gloves and other such things for a little scrap of money. And unfortunately, across the course of the play, that income is being shut down because this is the 1930s. There is a factory that is coming into the local area, which is going to be able to produce gloves and scarves and the like at a much higher rate for much cheaper. Chris is, of course, the person that she had her son Michael by, Gary, he is coming back into her life, basically. He's kind of a wanderer. He is not around. In fact, it's been many, many months, 11 months or something to that effect, since she's last seen him and since he's last seen their son. He doesn't really provide any money for the upkeep of their son. And in fact, Michael says that one of the reasons why he remembers these 2 days is it's really the first time he's ever been able to observe his father at all in his life at 7 years old. And Jerry is there now and is proposing that they get married. Now it's a little unclear to really even the audience. I think I've read some online that people have different senses of how earnest his suggestion really is in this play, that this may not be that this may be the kind of thing he does all the time and never really means it. And Chris's response when this conversation comes up over and over is, you say that, but then you just leave. You just leave again and go off wandering. So I don't know what the point of this conversation really is, Jerry, and such and such. That's a summary, of course. So all of the sisters have these sort of almost moments, I would say, across the course of the play where things almost happen for them. Amidst the broader landscape of the community, there is the Harvest Festival going on. The sisters at one point consider almost going to have an incredible night of the sort of dancing festival party part of it, and then decide they're too old really to go to this sort of thing, and how ridiculous for these, in their sense of the world, in the 1930s, their sense of being older women going to this festival, how silly, how ridiculous, so they decide not to go. Rose potentially almost has a budding romance with sort of a local deviant that doesn't end up panning out. Chris and Jerry almost maybe make it work work for their lives to sort of come together and for their relationship to be longstanding, and that doesn't really end up panning out. By the end of the play, all of these almosts have sort of accumulated. Jack ends up passing away due to his malaria after really disturbing his family with his beliefs nowadays. They sort of come to terms with it. Kate describes it as like his own kind of spiritual journey, and he passes away. Agnes and Rose, when they learn that their source of income for the family, the little modicum of income they can provide, is gone, decide just to leave and kind of go off on their own. Please don't search for us. And they leave and they go off on their own. And they're never seen again until Michael, many years later, finds that Agnes has died and Rose is like living in a poorhouse. It's very sad. Yeah.
It's very sad.
Very sad. Kate does end up losing her job as a school teacher because of this is a little bit of interpretation, but I think it's fairly clear, because of the Catholic Church's view of Jack's what they would describe as pagan beliefs that he's taken on after his time in Uganda. I'm sure there are little bits of things that I'm missing. This is such an ensemble show where all of the characters have these really specific journeys that they go on. But that's sort of the general sweep of the plot. What of this play you would really think of as a plot-heavy play? I don't know. It's definitely not that, I would think.
Yeah, it is truly a true ensemble sort of piece of just like each moment one character or another is getting their moment of unfortunate events, or a moment of trying to change their circumstances, or a moment of deciding to still have joy despite their circumstances, and each one sort of gets their chance to lead that moment. Oftentimes, certainly in the movie, Kate and Chris receive quite a bit of the kind of focus, and really in the play too, given Chris and Jerry's relationship, and of course Michael as the sort of omniscient narrator. There's quite a bit of focus put on Chris's story. But yeah, it is sort of, I liked what you said, unfortunate stuff happening. In a lot of ways, it's kind of to kind of keep with the analogy of Lughnasa and this sort of harvest festival. It's sort of the harvest of a lot of unfortunate stuff. It's this stuff that's been kind of planted long ago, that is kind of coming to fruition now, and trying to figure out whether or not they can navigate their way around or through or away from it.
And this is a play, because of the time in which it's set, in which whether or not these women get married has a very influential power over their lives, not just the romanticism of it, although there is some of that, of course there is, but just in reality, for their economic situation, it's very hard for them to make money. They live in this small town, and Kate's already the school teacher.
Right.
They don't need 5 school teachers, and so there's a very limited amount of jobs that as single women they can really hold to provide money. And since none of them ever ended up getting married, and some of that has to do, unfortunately, my sense of it is of Chris, because she had a child out of wedlock, that really cast a pallor over the other sisters in their lives when they were young. But so all that to say, some of this play is about the misfortune of not having gotten married when they were younger, and the economic pain, the economic suffering that has now caused on their life, that they're having a hard time making a living. And indeed, by the end of the play, they really can't.
Yeah. So you see that, I think, a lot in Kate kind of holds a lot of that just under the surface. She holds, there's quite a few passive aggressive, sometimes aggressive, but mostly passive aggressive lines about like, will this family ever be able to hold their head high? Will we ever get out of this sort of situation? And I think some of her, it rarely comes up, again, very passive aggressively, but her own sort of frustration at being the only one who is able to keep them running. And then the fear that happens when that job is threatened and ultimately taken away. That's all in the water, that they're there. And And yet there's also this like reflection from Michael about this moment and about the sort of nostalgia for this moment. So even while he's reflecting on the pain that's happening around them.
Yeah, I wonder some if the character, the prominence of Michael as the narrator has purely to do with the fact that Brian Friel, this play is somewhat based on a very, very loose sense of the stories of his family. And it's not as specific at all as even like Lanford Wilson's Lemon Sky is, which is another memory play. But there is some sense of like, perhaps the Michael character as his stand-in for Friel, that's the reason why he ends up being such a prominent figure. But very much unlike, like I would say the two best examples of memory play, quote unquote, are the original memory play, Glass Menagerie. And I just mean original because that Tennessee Williams is the one who used the term in that play. And then Lanford Wilson's Lemon Sky. And compared to those two plays, the Michael in the present moment of the play, not the future narrator, but the present moment, has very little to do with the plot. I mean, he's a side character at best. In fact, quite literally, he doesn't exist.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
I mean, there is no young Michael. So yes, please.
Yeah, that's a fascinating element of this play, which is for the most part a naturalistic play, at least a realistic play. For the most part, you're kind of moving through the scenes. Everyone's kind of going about daily things. There's knitting involved. There's cleaning involved. There's cooking of food. All this stuff is happening, and yet there is one distinct element in that Michael, the young Michael, the boy Michael, plays an active role in scenes. Characters talk to him. Characters give him things. He's making kites. He's playing stuff.
I don't know about an active role, but yeah, I mean, he has a role.
He has a role, and people like kiss him on the forehead. There's like
that's true.
There's like direct interaction with the boy Michael, who is an imaginative character. The adult Michael, who does the interactions and kind of speaks the narrations, speaks his lines. I assume different casts choose what degree of in character he is, whether he is kind of adult Michael speaking the lines of the boy or adopts a childish voice, but he is not sitting into the role. The boy Michael
right,
is
so
invisible.
he doesn't play the boy Michael with his body in space. Like he could, you're describing, he could act the lines like a voice actor,
right,
sort of would. But he's not like embodying boy Michael.
Yeah, which is different from the film. The film casts boy Michael, and there's a whole other set of scenes that happen as a result of that. But in this play, a very imaginative thing takes place, which again kind of leans into this memory play sort of theme of he's sort of like watching almost from like a third person perspective his memories of what happened.
But the third person perspective does not include his younger self.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're describing. So the sisters and Jerry, anybody that talks to him is talking to empty space. And they're interacting, they're miming their interactions with this young boy, Michael. And that, I think, I just think that's a really cool way of dealing with the fact that in our memories, you don't see yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Because your memories, just like your life, are experienced through your eyes. So you're not like a visual character in your memories, because your memories are your eyes looking out into the world. So I don't know exactly how it works. I mean, I watched a bunch of stuff to have different examples of it. So I understand practically how it works. I'm not sure how effective it is, if it's a little more weird than it is. What it definitely is fascinatingly interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just to think of that being the way to theatricalize memory.
Yeah.
And memory, because his younger self would not have seen himself in the memory.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And especially when you think about like the world that Friel is writing in, he's certainly influenced by Chekhov. He's influenced by Stanislavski. To have this riff on naturalism, to have this sort of like this surreal, sort of very magnetic moment of trying to have actors act with something that isn't there, is just a really cool really cool innovation on theater, really cool innovation on naturalism, even as because the rest of the play, well, not quite the rest of the play, because the other sort of piece that allows us entry into this sort of ethereal, surreally memory space is music. Music plays a prevalent theme throughout the play, and even at the end of the play, when Michael is kind of reflecting on, there's many memories from this summer, etc., but one of the memories that offers itself to me, he bases it in there's music floating through the scene, and people sort of swaying gently to the music. That kind of just to sum it up, it's a beautiful monologue. You should read it. I'm not going to do it now, but to sum it up is it's just there was lots of pain in that time. However, my dominant memory of it is the music coming from this radio, which plays a pretty prominent role in the play, and my family sort of swaying gently to that music. A sort of feeling rather than an actual concrete memory is what he holds the most from that summer.
And it's interesting because he acknowledges in that final monologue that that's a false memory.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that that like this memory, this picture, it's basically a tableau image of the family that is an echo of the very first tableau image of the play, of this same family, with some notable differences that we can talk about. But the final one is, so it's this tableau image of the family, and the music is playing, and the characters are sort of gently swaying, almost dancing, excuse me, almost dancing. And he says, like you're saying, that I have this memory of them, but it's a false memory. And that is it's an interesting way to end this play, to say, I have this memory of them that's not real. And it's this kind of picturesque, idealist, of a romanticized version of this time that was in all reality quite painful, and where the things that are going to happen next are going to break up the family. Some of what I described happens to the sisters, Agnes and Rose leaving and 25 years later dying in a poorhouse, and Jack dying of his malaria, and Kate losing her school teacher job. Some of that stuff actually happens after the action of the play, and we learn about it because narrator Michael tells us about it.
And the timing of that is interesting too, especially in conversation with this sort of re-remembering or choosing to remember different pieces. We find out about both Agnes and Rose, and then also Jack's ultimate fate, really only 2/3 of the way through. We get kind of what feels like a closing monologue about 2/3 of the way through the script, where he says that, like, eventually they left. I went and found them eventually, and they died really soon afterwards. Jack died later that summer, or later that next summer, so less than a year after he came home. And then we get another scene, and that scene is again like the whole group of them kind of moving around and kind of setting up a dinner that they're trying to have together. There's a scene between Jerry and Jack about a hat that they're trying to trade, and so you again get this sort of like, even while we know that some of these characters are going to have quite a hard rest of their life. In fact, almost all of the characters have a pretty hard rest of their life, except perhaps Jerry, who we find another revelation about that makes him even more of a jerk. Yeah, you kind of get the sense that despite all of that, they still crafted life together, and despite all of that, he has a memory of that sort of ethereal sense of belonging that he had in that space, despite all of the sort of chaos that was around it.
And this tableau image that is the one that he reflects all of that on at the end of the play, one thing that I think is really cool is the change in the costuming from the original tableau that we see to the final one that he reflects on as a false memory that's sort of hiding all of this pain that is to come for the family.
Yeah. So right away at the start of the play, he has an image of, I believe, both Jack and Jerry, dressed in these sort of like quite fine outfits, very well put together, sort of military outfit for Jack at least. And at the end of
And
the
it's like shining
yeah,
and
yep.
gorgeous, and Jerry's wearing this like tricorn hat that's incredible and like perfectly white and all this stuff.
Yeah. Versus the end of the play, which we see that the uniform that Jack had was quite old. It was from a previous position that he had when he was a chaplain to the Royal Army. And it doesn't fit him anymore because of the just the degree to which the malaria has affected him and his life has affected him. And it's very dirty, sort of worn through, doesn't fit him, drags along the floor behind him, sort of. And the scene continues, and still like this trade between Jerry and Jack of two hats happens, and it doesn't seem to bother them all that much. But you see the contrast between that original sort of very idealized memory and the sort of actuality of what was happening.
And to me, that what's so interesting about this is the possibility that what we see at the end is the much more realistic, from years of poverty, sort of degraded versions of the uniforms and I think some of the rest of the costumes as well. But that the memory that Michael is describing as being this false memory is actually the one from the beginning of the play.
Yeah.
Where everybody's stuff is, in this beautiful, perfect shape, this great, this sort of shining, gorgeous memory of this uniform and this hat, so that we're at once seeing the reality of their impoverishment and the hardship that they've endured in their life in this tableau, and at the same time, sort of remembering in the same way that Michael remembers the stuff from the beginning of the play, this floating image of everything perfect and gorgeous and this incredible music and this slight dancing. So it's a really incredible technique of a dramatist, I think, to ask the audience to have a memory of that shining perfect image in the same way that Michael has this memory of this shining perfect image.
Yeah, it welcomes the audience to critique their nostalgia. And examine so and in a different way than it would if you just like said something like that. Because of the scene image at the beginning, you have this sort of moment where you're like, oh, how often do I think back to fill in the blank, picnic, camping trip, someone's birthday, with this sort of glossy veneer, and kind of holding on to that memory in a way that like it grounds you, when who knows what was behind the scenes, and who knows what you were actually aware of even back then, that maybe you've chosen to forget, or maybe you just can't remember because there's so much fog back there. It's a beautiful way to kind of I feel like I don't. This is a little bit backwards engineering this comment, because I feel like the current moment of a lot of art and storytelling is dealing in nostalgia and just pretty much rampant giving of nostalgia. Like, here's something that you remember that you like, that we know you like, and so you'll enjoy it. This predates that a little bit, but it is sort of interesting commentary on this present moment of like, what if we more regularly examined our nostalgia just a little bit to see how much of it was actually what actually happened.
And that's interesting, because I also wonder if the reverse experience is happening too. The idea that there is some value in holding on to the idea of beauty and love, like all these moments that you have, even amidst the memories of a life of real hardship and real loss and death and oppression.
Yeah, and I think more so than necessarily. So we've kind of talked about Michael as this sort of God character and not God character, but like memory narrator weaving in and out sort of person. But what you just said, I think, is clearly evident in the lives of Kate, Maggie, Agnes, Rose, and Chris, who resiliently choose that. Resiliently choose to laugh together, to remember better times together, to, even in the midst of some of them not feeling the same way, like 2 or 3 will be, it is rare. the rare moments where all 5 of them are in the moment of joy together make this play super special, because most of the time 2 or 3 aren't in the same moment and they're kind of missing each other. And the couple times when they all sing a song together or dance together or kind of hit that moment of joy together are super powerful.
It's interesting. I assume, because Brian Friel's an incredible dramatist, that he knew how powerful the image I'm about to describe would be in this play. And the title of the play, of course, is a reference to it in some ways. But given how strong I think the play is related to these changing tableaus from the beginning and end, they're not, to me, and I think I would guess this is true for a lot of folks, they're not, to me, the really striking image of the play. I think the really striking image of the play is when all 5 sisters dance together to the radio that's finally started to work. The radio works and doesn't work throughout the play. It's kind of a faulty unit that they get to run sometimes and not get to run. But there's this moment in the beginning, in the middle of the play, where the music is finally going. They've just described how some of the people that they knew have gone on to have these really gorgeous, happy lives, and are back in town for the festival, and their lives have not been nearly like that. And finally they get the music working again, and they don't exactly know what they're going to eat. They're worried about Jack. They're worried about Kate losing her job. But the music finally starts again, and they have this incredible, cathartic, visceral. Brian Friel even uses words like grotesque and caricatured dancing moment. 4 of the 5 sisters dancing this wild, stomping in and out dance together, and then Kate sort of dancing off by herself. And that, I think, is the image of the play. I mean, on my cover of the play that I have, it's just like an image of a skirt and a boot dancing, because the dancing is really the crucial image.
Yeah. And I think there's so certainly there's an accessible theme there that I'll talk about in just a second. But there's also the theme of this festival that's happening, and this Catholic family with a pagan festival happening right next to them, that is full of dancing and full of music, and this family that has been both under scrutiny because of their connection to their brother Jack, but also their connection to Chris, and the sort of the rules that they think they have to follow, and finally letting loose in that scene and dancing together, even if they can't go into the festival as they plan to at one point. But there's just a beautiful tie-in to what is happening with this family, and them kind of being able to let loose with each other a little bit. Even Kate, who at the very end stands up and dances kind of all on her own a little bit. But it is this sort of how much do you try to find these sort of joy moments even when there's so much wrong around you, and the all of them coming together to do it makes those moments even more impactful.
Yeah, well, and I totally love how you're describing that the fact that we know there's this incredible festival with this big nostalgic, to bring in your earlier point, music, dance festival, that it's especially for young people. That's how they describe it. And again, their sense of who's old and not is a little bit from the 1930s.
Right.
That doesn't quite ring true to me today, but that's their sense of the world in the 30s. And so they feel that they're too old for this basically festival of exuberant young people who come together to dance. And they, as they're thinking about going, it's their descriptions of just the physical empowerment of being able to participate in this taxing, incredible dancing that was happening at the festival. And they decide, of course, not to go. So I love how you described that this is it's like a mini festival just for them.
Yeah.
They get to capture a little bit of it, just them together in this room.
Yeah, because you're right on there. They have these memories of going as the Mundy sisters to this festival. It's not just that they don't go because it's a different faith or because of something else. This is a town festival that you go to, and part of it is tied to the thing that you said right away at the beginning of this question of, maybe we're past this moment where this festival even can be for us. Would it be inappropriate for us to show up to this thing, even though so much of the longing and so much of the hopes that that festival does offer them have not been realized for them, or ostensibly that the festival offers to one who engages in it, have not been realized for them. So you kind of have simultaneously that fear that maybe they don't belong there, and also that longing for what it meant to them before, and the still hope that somehow it could be realized.
Yeah, well, and so much of this play is this running theme of these, again, this how they would describe it, these pagan rituals and ceremonies in the Celtic rural pagan tradition, and then of course the tradition that Jack brings from Africa of their spiritual experience and their religion, versus the sort of strict moral Catholicism that especially Kate sort of acts as the stand-in for, and that's throughout. That's there. You're going to read and see a lot of that if you engage with this play. But to me, the some of the way that theme is expressed that resonates more with me is this conflict between like acting as they should act, the duty, the responsibility, the strictures of how we ought to behave given our economic circumstances, given the moral decisions, quote unquote, made by our family a long time ago, given how the community feels about us, how we ought to behave, versus this sort of abandon, this sort of letting loose, this fantasy, this desire that is expressed a lot through the dancing. And so there's that moment where the sisters dance together, but there's a lot of other ones too. The Chris and Jerry dancing together in both acts. There's these sort of beautiful dances that they do together, which I think are the same thing. It's like, that's not really, you had a kid out of wedlock and then you abandon them and you don't pay for any of the support for the kid and all this stuff. It's not really supposed to be that you come back and just sweep Chris off her feet for a few minutes and then leave again. And yet it is.
And yeah, absolutely. The sort of consistent choice to engage each other. And even there's a line where I think one of the sisters notices that Chris is like a different, more filled with more joy when she's around Jerry. And so there's lots of that interesting. Again, like, yeah, I agree. There's like, it shouldn't work, and yet somehow it's working. We find out more and more about Jerry. I think I've mentioned before that he has a whole other family in Wales that he just never told either family about. And so yeah, there's lots going on. And in these scenes where they're kind of like choosing to move into that zone, even though there's a lot of fear, especially from the family in general, about like what is the proper thing to do, or what is maybe proper is the wrong word. What is the appropriate thing to do for our situation, and trying to get out of it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that they watch and comment on what is happening, both when they're in the moment and when they're outside of the moment, and apply these judgments. Like the best example of that is when Chris and Jerry are talking in the garden. It's the first time that he's been to see them in months. I think it's 11 months or something like that. And apparently he's never really even met Michael, because Michael again says, this is the first time I really ever observed my father. So Chris and him are talking in the garden, and so that you have that scene going on, and at the same time inside the house you have a scene of the other four sisters observing, commenting, layering their own sense, both of the romance and the how happy Chris looks of it, and of the, she should throw him out on his ear, how dare he come around like this, I don't exactly know what in the world they have to talk about, how could they possibly be dancing together. So all of the commentary, the sort of internal life of the brain that they express through this chattering conversation with each other about this moment that is at once not supposed to happen and sort of beautiful in the way that it happens.
Yeah, and you kind of consist, like, there's there's so many like small moments. This is a play that you could go back and rewatch and rewatch, or reread and find something new again. There's like there's the undercurrent of what you just described. There's the undercurrent of Agnes maybe having some feelings for Jerry, and sort of a odd scene, not odd scene, but a tense scene, where she and Jerry are dancing to the radio, and Chris goes and turns the radio off and kind of resets things. It's a very brief scene. It goes away pretty quickly. But there's a lot, just like, again, this is kind of speaking into how this play is a family play as well. As much as it's a memory play, it's also this play about like, this is what, family lives with, trying to navigate this really hard situation together. There's all sorts of things that you get brief glimpses into that ultimately maybe lead to consequences. Like maybe that's part of Agnes's decision to leave with Rose, is the sort of consistent friction there, but you don't see a scene where she says that. It's all these kind of small moments for you, both it's exciting both as an audience member to examine them, but also as an actor or a production team to examine them too. That's what kind of consistently gives this play something more to play with, is these characters and digging deeply into them.
And the way that the sort of symbology of what they're doing kind of plays into the memory too. Like the dancing is such a strong symbol that it sticks in the head, and it's sort of a representative, what happened to them. And those are the things Michael remembers. I mean, I always find that the struggle with memory plays, Lemon Sky I think does this a little better than Glass Menagerie actually, is that we don't remember extended conversations in the way that plays present that we do.
Right.
I mean, we just don't, like, the Glass Menagerie, there's like 20-minute scenes of really intense conversation. There's just no way that you remember every word everybody said. So there's a sort of false reality to the memories, right? But Tom in Glass Menagerie comments on, these are the things I actually remember. And then in Lemon Sky, they play a little bit more with like, these are the things I wish I remembered. This is how it could have gone, and that kind of stuff. And Dancing at Lughnasa, he does that too. The stuff he describes, the stuff that he really remembers, and they tend to be these sort of highly symbolic representative things. The sisters dancing together, seeing his father for the first time, this false memory of these gorgeous clothes and the music playing and the sort of slight dancing that they're all doing. The rest of it is really for our benefit as the audience to understand the context of these memories that he holds far into the future.
And again, to welcome us into the act of examining his memories at the very least, and possibly kind of extending it to ourselves as well, and wondering about our own families, about our own pasts, about all the things that we remember from our waking times, and yeah, taking another look at it and examining how it brought us to where we are today.
Well, I think we are about out of time for this conversation.
It's true. Again, like as I said a couple minutes ago, this play has such depth, and such rewatchability, restageability. So there's certainly stuff that we missed in this conversation. We would love to keep having it with all of you, though. We don't have to stop the conversation at the end of the podcast. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at the username @NoScriptPodcast. We also have a Gmail, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on any of those sites, and if you have been in this play, read this play, watched this play, watched the movie, just like know stuff about this play or about the moment that it is written for, we would love to keep talking about Dancing at Lughnasa with you.
Absolutely. If you've liked this conversation or any of our other conversations, please ask your family, your friends, anybody you know that likes scripts, theater, stories, anything like that, to check us out. We are on Podbean, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, now YouTube. We're in a lot of places for you to be able to find us. An easy way to do it if folks have a hard time with technology is if they've got a Facebook account, they can just like us on Facebook, and then, hopefully in their feed, our new episode will appear as it comes every Monday, or they can just find our page. And the new episode is up every Monday on our Facebook page. You can just click and it'll play for you.
We're just getting started on this season. We got a good number of episodes coming up. So until next week when we're talking about another script. I am Jackson Nikolai.
I'm Jacob Mann Christensen. Thanks for joining us for No Script the Podcast.